Hello! This week we are going to talk about everything you need to know about feeding your newborn baby, that brand new fresh baby. How do we feed them?
Yeah, and just in case it's your first time meeting us, I'm Kurt, I'm a board certified pediatrician and new dad.
I'm Sarah, I am a board certified OBGYN and first time mom.
And we are the Doctors Bjorkman. Welcome back. We are guessing that the reason you're watching the episode today is because you have a new baby at home and you're now realizing that they don't come with an instruction manual. Nope. Or maybe you're worried your baby isn't eating enough, or you're worried they're eating too much.
Yes. Whatever group you are in, we want you to know that we have been there too. Over the first few months of having that new baby, we wondered, is she eating enough? Is she eating too much? Like, how do we feed this baby?
Yeah, babies are both really easy and incredibly difficult to care for all at the same time. Yeah. And so if you're feeling clueless or just hoping to be a bit more informed about what to do, hopefully by the end of this episode, you can have a bit more confidence that you can provide your baby what they need to grow and be healthy.
So we're gonna start out by talking about how much breast milk or formula your baby should eat in a day, and then dive into ways to know your baby is getting enough to eat. Some common baby signs that say they're ready to eat, and then some other special things to consider if you're struggling with feedings.
Before we get started today, we need to first say that these are generalized guidelines for healthy babies who are born full term and who do not have other special medical conditions. Right. Premature babies often need special formula for their nutritional needs, and babies with other diseases or other conditions may need extra calories to help them grow. Right. If your baby falls into one of these categories, or if you've got concerns that your baby isn't growing, please be sure to talk to their medical provider.
So we are going to start by talking about how much breast milk or formula your baby should eat in a day.
Yeah. First off, babies need to eat a lot in the first month of life. An average baby needs about 100 kcals per kilo per day, which would be like a 150 pound or 70 kilo person eating like 28 McDonald's hamburgers in one day.
Those tiny little babies also have tiny little stomachs, which means it's okay when they don't eat a lot all at once, but it does mean that they need to eat often. We really like this graphic that shows how small a baby's stomach is that first week of life. It's about the size of a grape, and then it grows to be about 1.5 or 2 ounces, the size of a strawberry by the end of the first week. And then it's about 2.5 to 5 ounces, or the size of a lime by 1 month.
So the best advice we can give you for the first month of life is to feed your baby when they're hungry.
Yeah.
Now, I realize it sounds super simple, but honestly, during that first month, especially, babies just need to eat, and they need to eat often. You don't need to worry about forcing big volumes, but offering feeds every 2 to 3 hours can help make sure that they're getting the nutrition they need during those first few weeks. Yeah. And honestly, there are going to be periods during those first 2 weeks where your baby is going to want to eat every hour and going to have cluster feedings. So don't be surprised by that. That is natural and normal.
Okay. Yeah.
So babies also don't have the stores in their little livers to keep their blood sugars stable like an older infant might. And so it's really important not to go significant amounts of time between feeds, and your pediatrician is probably going to recommend not letting them go more than 4 hours between feeds in that first month.
Yeah. So for those of you who are breastfeeding, there is this extra complicating factor of getting your milk in and actually learning how to breastfeed. And I know from personal experience, it can add a ton of stress to the equation. We had a lot of issues with latch and a tongue tie, and our first couple weeks were tough. So from one first-time mom to another, if you are struggling with breastfeeding, get help. Go see a lactation consultant, talk to your pediatrician, talk to other moms around you to get the support you need for breastfeeding.
For those of you looking for some more concrete numbers about how much to feed your baby, most newborns during that first week to 2 weeks of life are eating every 2 to 3 hours or 8 to 12 times a day at least. And they're going to start out only taking about a ½ ounce per feeding, or 15 cc's for the first couple days. And then by the time they're a week old, it's about 1 to 2 ounces or 30 to 60 cc's per feed. By the time they're 2 weeks of age, maybe they're able to take 2 to 3 ounces per feeding. Again, 60 to 90 cc's per feed.
So by 2 months of age, babies are usually taking about 4 to 5 ounces per feed every 3 to 4 hours, and then 4 to 6 ounces per feed by 4-ish months of age. Now, special notes for breastfed babies. So in those first weeks, if you are direct breastfeeding, you don't actually know numbers of how many ounces babies are getting unless you're doing weighted feeds with your lactation consultant. But it can be frustrating because you don't know, hey, how many ounces is baby getting at the breast? If you're direct breastfeeding, you want to put the baby off for one breast, let them eat, keep them awake a good 10 to 15 minutes, always offer the other side kind of as dessert, and know that if baby is growing and having wet diapers, they are eating enough.
Yep, and we're going to go into some of those later in this episode too.
Yes. The rule, kind of a general rule that really helped me if I was going to be away from the baby, breastfed babies need about 1 to 1.25 ounces per hour for every hour they're gone from mom. So if I was going to be gone from Cease for 3 hours, I would know she was going to need about 3.75-ish ounces of breast milk for that 3-hour period. And it's really important with breastfed babies to not overfeed them or give them lots and lots of milk because then
when they're away from mom.
Right, because then it is just really hard. If baby gets used to eating these bigger volumes, it's really hard for breastfeeding moms to keep up with their pump. So really focusing on those 1 to 1.25 ounces per hour away from mom is breast milk is magic, and that is what breastfed babies need.
Yep, and for those of you not in the US, that's about 30 to 40 cc's per hour away from mom to feed. Other things that we think it's important to remember is that feeding goals for baby are measured over the course of a full 24 hours, and so don't be bothered if one feed isn't quite as much as another. It's also, don't be surprised, as we mentioned, if baby wants to have cluster feeds, feeding back to back during certain parts of the day.
Yeah, I will say, you know, we said in those first weeks, 8 to 12 times a day is, you know, kind of average, but I will say, thinking back and looking at my tracking app that was tracking breastfeeding, it was 16, 20 times a day. She just was constantly on the boob, and that is very, very normal for breastfed babies.
Yeah, those first 2 weeks you can expect baby to be eating about 15 to 20 ounces a day, and then that becomes 20 to 25 ounces per day by 1 month and 24 to 30 ounces per day by 2 months. In general, babies are going to continue to eat about that 24 to 32 ounces of milk per day through 6 months of age, and then they continue to keep eating about that same amount even after that, because then they're starting to get extra calories from the real food that they're introducing at that 4 to 6 age month.
So we'll be sure to cover initiation of solids and baby-led weaning in some upcoming episodes in the next month or so. How do you know that your baby is getting enough to eat? The best way is to actually weigh them. If the baby is gaining weight week by week, then that means they're getting enough calories regardless of the other factors. This is one of the key things your pediatrician is going to look at during those routine scheduled checkups over the first few months of life.
Yeah, most babies will actually double their birth weight by about 5 months of age and then triple that birth weight by their first birthday.
But if you want more, some day-to-day measures and other good things that you can look at are that your new baby...
Yeah, by the end of that first week, they should be having 6 or more wet diapers per day and with nearly colorless or pale yellow urine.
Yeah, they seem satisfied and happy for an average of, 1 to maybe 2 or 3 hours after a feed.
Yeah. And then they should also be nursing, as we mentioned, at least 8 to 12 times in a 24-hour period.
Yep, maybe more. After the newborn period, following the number of wet diapers in a day can be a good way to follow that baby is likely getting enough milk or formula to stay hydrated, and with that, likely enough to grow. They should be at a minimum of 4 wet diapers a day, but for most babies, it's probably more like 6 or more wet diapers per day.
For your early newborn, it is especially important to be on the lookout for feeding cues or special signs that your baby wants to eat. Most babies are going to get into a regular routine of eating about every 3 hours, but it's very normal for there to be periods, especially in those first couple of weeks that we talked about, where they want to eat even more frequently.
A baby who is hungry is often gonna cry. Like, they will let you know they are hungry. But if you look for these cues ahead of time, you may be able to catch those signs of hunger even before they are to the point of crying. And hopefully that makes kind of the feeding a bit more of an enjoyable bonding experience for you and baby.
Yeah, and so some of these classic feeding cues are things like licking their lips.
Yep, sticking their little tongue out.
Yeah, or maybe they're rooting, which is just kind of like moving their jaw, mouth, and head in search of the breast.
The boob. Yep. They might put their hands in their mouth more frequently and over again.
Or they're just like opening their mouth kind of over and over again too.
And generalized fussiness, a hangry baby.
Yep, and then sucking on everything around them, including maybe even sometimes dad.
Yes. It is important to realize, of course, that every time your baby cries or sucks, it's not necessarily because he or she is hungry. Babies suck not only for hunger, but it's also for comfort. That sucking releases hormones in their brain that are comforting. It can be very hard for parents to tell the difference, but sometimes your baby just needs to be cuddled or changed or given a pacifier.
And finally, what should you do if you're struggling with feeds?
Sure. So the first thing we have to say here is that you are not alone. Our first month with baby Cease was really rough. And our number one piece of advice here is to get help. Tell your pediatrician, see a lactation consultant, have someone who knows all about baby feeding, watch you feed your baby, and try to keep a record of how much baby is eating or for how long, and how often. So I loved and used the Huckleberry app. It's a free app, and so that I could keep track of left breast for, you start a timer and then you stop it, and then you right breast, the other, start a timer, so you know how long, because
and then also how often and how many feeds you've done during the day.
Right. So with bottle-fed babies, you are keeping track of how many ounces they are eating in a day. Breastfed babies, you are keeping track of how long they are eating, and on each breast in a day. And so Huckleberry app was my favorite.
Yep. And just to say it again, if you are struggling with feeds or weight gain, ask for help.
Yes. Our little girl ended up having a mild tongue tie and some issues that made direct breastfeeding very, very difficult for her. And it was also kind of a setup for supply issues. So we had to seek medical help.
Yeah. It's also important for us to mention that there could be a medical reason your baby's struggling with feeds and or weight gain. The most common cause for poor weight gain in babies is that they just aren't getting the needed volume of feedings in a day. But there can absolutely be issues with absorption of nutrients, or that your baby could just be burning extra calories due to something like a lung condition, a heart condition, or something else that could be a setup for poor growth as well.
With that, let us know any questions you have, any tips or tricks or apps that you liked. In the next month, we are also going to cover the transition to solid foods, and some baby-led weaning, which we did with our little gal, and we loved it. So make sure that you are subscribed to catch those episodes, and more coming at you in the upcoming weeks.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye.
We're doctors.
But not your doctors.
Anything we've said in this video is for education or entertainment purposes only.
It is not medical advice.
Any specific medical questions you have should be directed to your provider.